If you've ever wished you had a podcasting pro with nearly a decade of experience whispering growth secrets into your ear, that's exactly what you'll get when you tune into Podcast Growth Tools with me, your host, Kylee Chandler. This is the ultimate show for you if you're ready to grow your podcast audience, skyrocket engagement, and turn your show into a traffic-driving, list-building powerhouse. I've been in the podcasting world since 2015, helping creators like Amy Porterfield grow their shows to over 1 million downloads a month. My superpower? Breaking down proven podcast strategies and marketing techniques into step-by-step guidance you can actually implement without fluff, overwhelm, or guesswork. On this show, we're getting real about what actually moves the needle when it comes to growing your podcast audience and using it to boost your email list growth. From actionable insights and expert interviews to behind-the-scenes secrets, I'll help you turn your podcast into a traffic-driving, list-growing machine. Grab your earbuds, hit subscribe, and let's take your podcast to the next level. All right, friends, if you have been paying attention, you know that today's episode is going to be a little bit more of a vulnerable episode for me. I'm going to share a little bit behind the scenes of what my experience has been chasing downloads for the last 6 years of my career and of just being in the podcast industry, and kind of the moments that I've come to realize over time and really in hindsight of what I experienced, because I really do believe that downloads are not how we validate our podcast, our success. It's not how we monetize a podcast. I mean, with the caveat of, if you are using advertisers, many do still look at downloads. We'll get into that as well. But really, at the end of the day, there's so many other things that can show not only the success of your podcast, but prove that it's doing so much more for your business than just being something that you can use as a vanity metric and show your downloads and use that to look really big or important. And so I'm really excited that you're here today. I have a lot to share with you. I'm going to share some personal stories, some personal takes, and then just why this might be important for you to really take a look at and ask yourself if you too are relying on downloads and how that feels for you and your business and how it's directing decisions and things like that. So, before we dive in, though, I wanted to share with you that I am currently working on putting together a digital course, which is very exciting. I know a lot of you are asking about it because I do my one-on-one consulting, but that's just not the right fit for everyone. And so I'm excited to share my content with the world, share my framework, my strategies for not only growing your podcast audience, but also growing your email list. And really, at the end of the day, using your podcast as a vehicle to achieve bigger things in your company, whether that is increase your revenue, grow your email list, grow your audience, be seen as a thought leader, create more sustainable, juicy content. There's so many things that you can be doing. So I'm really excited and I would love to have you join me. If you're interested, go to podcastmarketinghub.com/beta, drop your email and your name, and then you will be on the list when I announce when that's open. And the beautiful thing is that if you are in the first group that goes through this digital course, you are going to get the discounted rate of being that first cohort to go through the beta launch and other really juicy goodies that just are going to make it feel really special for you. So I'd love for you to be kind of in that first cohort that gets to go through that and experience that with me. But trust me when I say it's not the first time I've used it. This framework is tried and true. It's proven. And so that's the exciting thing, that I can bring it to the masses. So again, that's podcastmarketinghub.com/beta. And I can't wait to see you on that list. So let's dive in. Let me share a little bit of a story that comes to mind over my years of working in the podcast industry and having downloads as the main metric. I mean, really the main metric that we looked at across the board, especially in my roles that I was in at the time. So I remember when I was working for someone and all of a sudden we had this dream and this goal of hitting 1 million downloads per month, because we were seeing that, oh man, the big name podcasters were hitting this as well. And here's what I'll say. We don't know what we don't know. We didn't realize back then how falsified these numbers were and how how many bots were actually probably in that audience. And so it was just what everyone was doing in the industry. We weren't questioning it. It was kind of the golden standard of being in the industry. And so it was exciting to chase that number. I will admit it was really exciting. Like it fueled me and my personality, and I can be ambitious and driven. I am ambitious and driven. And so for me to have that number dangling, like the dangling carrot in front of me, I was like, yeah, let's fucking go. And so, anyways, I just remember putting together, a really intentional strategic strategy to grow us from where we were to where we wanted to go. And there was a lot of moving pieces and there was a lot of parts, and there are still a lot of parts when it comes to seeing your audience expand as a podcaster and creating real loyal super fans. So that has not changed. However, I remember during this season of really strategic and rapid growth, I remember feeling so anxious and fatigued. And I would literally wake up every morning and I would log into the podcast hosting platform and I would check the downloads. How close are we? I would then calculate based on the percentage that of downloads that we achieved this month, how realistic is it to hit that 1,000,000%? And every week I would be like, all right, we're 20% there. We're 35% there. We're 75% there. Like it was such a big part of what I was doing and what I was focusing on. And it literally drove me to a state of anxiety because I was like, well, what happens if we don't hit it? What is that going to say about the podcast or the strategy or the intentional things that we are doing to try and hit that goal of 1,000,000 downloads? And I can tell you from a standpoint of watching other people on the team, it had the same effect. We were staking so much on what downloads meant about the podcast, about our audience, about the business, about how we should spend our time around the podcast and what we should be doing. Like there were so many things that were tied to this that it just created this really almost heavy feeling around creating this beautiful creative outlet, which if you know anything about me, you know that I love the podcast to feel like a creative outlet. I also want you to have the systems and the funnels set up in your business so that that creative outlet can generate revenue and audience members for you. So anyways, I just, in hindsight, thinking back to that, I just think we put too much on that podcast, the podcast downloads. We hung so much on it when we really didn't even for a second start to look the other way and go, wait a minute, what other metrics could really be showing us the true success of our podcast, of, how it's nurturing, how it's really nurturing our audience? There's so many things, right? So I want to walk you through a few things, lessons I've learned, realizations I've had based on kind of my experience during that time frame. And so I think the first one is that we get so stuck into this mindset of downloads feeling like the only proof that your show is successful, that your show matters, that your show is running with the big dogs. But the thing about it is when you tie your downloads to your worth and your business worth and your business revenue, you're going to get so burned out, and it's just not going to give you the real raw data that's showing you what you need to know to make the right decisions, in your business when it comes to your podcast, and also to make it feel good. And speaking of it feeling good, I really believe that when you only focus on the downloads, the podcast becomes a chore, right? It doesn't feel creative. It dulls the question. And it sometimes, honestly, it leads to questioning your voice or your teaching strategy. I mean, I've spoken with people who don't have massive audiences, but man, the people who are in their audience are obsessed with their show because they know that how this person is teaching is so impactful. So I never want, the download numbers to affect you feeling like your voice or how you teach is powerful, because it's not a true indication of that. Another thing I want to touch on that I often see is download numbers only driving content. There are so many other metrics nowadays, luckily, that we can lean on and see what kind of content is really resonating with our audience. We can see starts, plays, we can see consumption, we can notice followers week to week to week. And these can all be indications of what kind of content is really resonating with your listener. And so when we simply look at how many downloads one episode got, it's not always telling the full story, just because there are so many automatic downloads set up that that person might have it downloaded to their phone and never actually listen to it. So I do love leaning on metrics to conduct or to drive information or about what content is working, what content is resonating with your audience. But truly leaning only on the downloads of that episode is not going to be the best indicator. So that is why I really urge you to start to look at multiple metrics. That means using some metrics from your hosting platform, using some metrics directly from Spotify for creators, using some metrics directly from Apple Connect. Because when we really take that holistic look at one single episode, one piece of content, that's when we start to see the full picture. So another thing that I think is so overlooked is these real wins that aren't measured by downloads. And so here's a few examples. One is getting a heartfelt DM from somebody who listened to your show. It's so interesting because I have had multiple big name, pretty much all big name podcasters I've ever talked to say that, oh, that episode that didn't do so great with downloads, but was really vulnerable and really personal. I got so many DMs. I've never gotten that many DMs on a show. Like, I hear this all the time. It's so common. In fact, I just said it to one of my clients yesterday. I'm like, listen, you might be doing these shows and they feel really good to you. And maybe, like, for instance, I see a lot of female podcasters who maybe teach business or teach some side of business, eventually just get so burnt out on that teaching that they move into mindset, right? This is like something we see all the time. And so when they do a podcast episode that's about mindset and it lights them up, they have so much fun doing it. It feels so creative. And then they're so disappointed when the downloads don't reflect that. Then that's when they see all of these downloads, all of these people who resonate, people who are really listening, super fans, get into their DMs and tell them how important that message was or that episode was. So let's not discount the power of people getting into our DMs. Like, that's where we invoke change. That's where we invoke transformation. So always lean into that. Notice what kind of content you're getting DMs on. It might be something where you taught really strategically, but just really lean into that. Be mindful. And here's the other thing: those people who are getting into your DMs are super fans, or they just became a super fan when you are delivering this really juicy, wonderful content to them, and they feel like they have to message you and tell you. Another thing that I don't think we look at enough is how many clients are we actually getting from the podcast? And this is personally one of my favorite metrics to track, is having these really intentional funnels that are specifically linked to the podcast and seeing how that person moves through the funnel and then moves into a paying customer or an engaged audience member, because this is really the most important piece of having a podcast, right? Having a podcast, sure, it sets you up as a thought leader, which I do love. It nurtures your audience, but how much nurturing can you do without truly getting them into your business, onto your email list, and eventually into your product, which is the main transformation that you offer, right? So I highly, highly recommend that anytime you are doing a CTA or anytime you're creating a marketing funnel, you figure out a way to use your podcast simultaneously with it so that you can really use your podcast to nurture, but also drive your audience members to whatever you have to offer. So that kind of leads me to this next section. And it really is starting to look at the bigger win being the conversion over the download. So the win of a podcast episode is how many people actually took action from that. Or if you set up a marketing funnel that is fueled by the podcast, you go, okay, how many people were so enticed by those podcast episodes that they took action? They joined the email list. They started a DM conversation. They got into a funnel and nurture sequence. They bought something. So I want to encourage us to start going from how many downloads did this episode get to who took action from this episode, and really taking the time to set up your funnels that you need to be able to track those things versus saying, I just don't know how to track how somebody comes from my podcast audience, because it's not true. We can do it. We just have to take a little bit of more an intentional approach. And here's the other thing I'll say. When it comes to podcast growth, it can be a little bit slower these days, right? Like back in, I don't know, 2020, 2021 through maybe 23, even, when the iOS update happened. The podcast growth that we see today is in terms of downloads is significantly lower, but I truly believe it's more meaningful, sustainable, and I believe it's more profitable. There are so many podcasts to choose from. And I truly feel that when somebody takes action to engage with a podcast and a podcaster, the chances of you turning them into an actual paying customer skyrockets. And so for us to see a huge jump in downloads, you know, 3-4 years ago, we weren't seeing the conversions, right? But we also didn't know how to track them as well. And if we would have been tracking the conversions, you know what? They might have looked pretty similar to how they look today. The downloads would have just been exaggerated. All right. So, what metrics do I personally love to lean into? I love to look at your email list growth from week to week. I love to look at how your email list is growing from those specific podcast focused, podcast centric funnels, how people are engaging with you in your DMs, how those people in those funnels are converting to buying customers, or people taking you up on your lead magnet or taking you up on your quiz, all of that stuff. So I really love that. Another metric that I love is the followers metric, because this is something that both Spotify and Apple track, and you can literally watch it increase week to week to week. And those are people that are actually clicking a button, taking action. And so we know that they are engaged, right? We know that they are interested. And I think that that's a really important metric to be paying attention to as well. All this to say is I love that, I feel like every year, even maybe every even 6 months, we're getting new metrics for the podcast industry, which is so great. But sometimes we have to refresh our mindset around which ones really matter. And at the end of the day, you want to take your podcast listener from just listening to the podcast to being in your orbit, being in your world, being on your email list, and buying your product. That is the goal. If you're an entrepreneur, if you have offers to sell, that's the big main goal. So I encourage you to just sit with yourself and notice when we have this conversation about downloads, like, how does that really feel for you? And what metrics feel better? And when you do start paying attention to all of these other metrics, notice what really starts to move the needle and how that feels for you. So if you've been chasing downloads and you're getting tired and fatigued and it's skewing the decisions that you make in your business, I really encourage you to start to find some new metrics to pay attention to and just notice what happens. Thank you so much for being here. Again, I'm really excited to launch my course into the world. It's not quite ready yet, but I am going to be taking note of all of you who are interested in joining it. And so if you would like to let me know and be the first to know about when I do launch this course, it'll be in a beta version. You can head to podcastmarketinghub.com/beta, and I will see you there and you'll be the first to know. So thank you so much for being here. Obviously, leaving reviews is so helpful, and just let me know what you think of this episode. I know it was a little bit different than what I usually do. I tend to do a lot of those strategy ones, but I'm really glad you were here for it. So thank you. And I will see you next week.